This video was sponsored by Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to build your online store, website, and more. Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne. And every artist has a weakness. Most of us have at least one thing that we specifically feel like we're really bad at. So today I'm going to be talking about the 5 most common artist weaknesses and basically how you can improve on each one from my experience. So the first one I wanted to talk about is the artist who has trouble with architecture, backgrounds, things like that. Basically anything that would require a ruler and a lot of perspective knowledge. This is a very daunting skill for a lot of artists, and I remember when I was first learning how to do proper complicated perspective, I felt like that it really was more math than art, and I think that's one of the things that really stresses out a lot of artists. It just feels so technical and fiddly, and there's so many wrong answers that it could be really unfun to learn, and I think that's what holds a lot of people back. So the first thing that I recommend if you feel like the thing you're worst at is drawing buildings and things like that is basically to find some buildings that you think are really cool looking, really interesting. Create an inspiration board, whether that's on I don't know, Tumblr or Pinterest or wherever you have a bunch of images that you can all sort of collect easily for yourself. You can even put it into a Word document, I guess, if that's more your style. And basically just look at buildings, houses, things that you like, and try to look at what it is that you like about them. Is this the silhouettes? And really get into the details of what makes them interesting to you. The other thing that you can do is use things like 3D models. You can use Google SketchUp or games like The Sims where you can design your own house, and that can make things so much easier. You can even trace directly on the screen caps that you take from the game. I actually made a whole video sort of talking about this as a strategy that will be linked in the the little thing in the corner if you want to watch that. But basically you got to keep your head up, hang in there. It's really not as painful as you're probably experiencing it right now. You will eventually get the hang of it, and eventually you might even find that drawing buildings and things can actually be as fun as drawing characters. You just have to get used to it first. The next weakness I want to talk about is the weakness for clothing design and accessory design. I don't really feel like I have this anymore, but when I was first getting started in drawing, I felt like the only thing I knew how to draw was characters in jeans and t-shirts. And I think it was because I mainly wore jeans and t-shirts back then. This was way back when I was first learning how to draw, and I just wasn't that interested in fashion. So every time I tried to come up with an interesting character, I never really thought about their clothes, and it would always end up being sort of an afterthought. So I think that a lot of people who have this particular weakness are generally just people who aren't that interested in fashion, so they don't have this really big visual library of things like lace and zippers and buttons and various different accessories, hats, and different styles of glasses. Honestly, I think the only way to fix this problem is to start getting interested in fashion, not necessarily for yourself, but just as an artist to look at various different references. I mean, you don't have to copy off of them, but just sort of being aware of different cuts of clothing throughout the ages and different little details that might be something that you want to use, figuring out how to draw lace, figuring out how hems work, and where you're going to see that stitching on a garment. This can help out tremendously, and you can really see your character designs become dramatically more interesting just by getting a little bit more interested in the costuming. I think that people who struggle with this are really just the type who like to really think about the story of what they're drawing and not get too caught up in the details. But as costuming is a huge part of character design, I highly recommend taking the time and just getting a little bit into what might enhance your character and enhance your story through what they wear. It might make a huge difference. One trick you might not have thought of is if you look at a character design that you really like the look of, look up a cosplay tutorial for that character. See how their costume would actually be constructed, and you might find a lot of details that your eyes just sort of overlooked when you first glance at them. Next weakness I want to talk about is the balance in symmetry. Now, this is actually a really common problem, and it's something that completely haunted me for many years of my artist career, and it's still something I have to worry about often, which is basically the lack of natural ability to see when something is in balance and an inability to basically see when certain parts are basically just wonky. It's kind of hard to explain, but the other eye that artists are always talking about how hard it is to draw, this is basically a symptom of this problem where it's really tricky to match one part of your drawing to another part of your drawing, and sometimes it's hard to see that it's wrong until like the very end when it's really hard to change things. A good example of this is not just the other eye, but also things like the mass of a character's hair or clothing can sometimes be really off from one side to another. I often have to check myself when I'm drawing a character with a hoodie to make sure that the hood is not like puffier and bigger on one side than the other. Also just generally like getting details slightly wrong, like on one side if a character has a cuffed sleeve and on the other if that cuff is like a little more detailed or not present at all. Those are the kind of things that when you're like in a rush or just trying to draw something quickly, they can slowly sort of build up until your character looks all like Frankenstein-esque, like really messed up and like it doesn't match itself. Now, the most common advice to combat this kind of thing is just to keep your eyes fresh by flipping your canvas every now and then. I also think that another thing that can help is planning your drawing properly. I find that I have a lot more trouble with this when I'm drawing straight out of my head without any references and without any plan. I think that when you slow down a bit and you just sort of focus on the pose and on the structure of the body, it's less likely to have these problems popping up, and I find that they're a lot more exaggerated when I am in a hurry. I also think that another thing that can help is making sure you're not turning your head too much or your paper as you draw. This can mess up the like viewing angle that you're seeing of it, and that can really throw you off. Speaking of problems that happen when you rush, the weakness that I want to talk about next is the weakness of polish. At least that's what I'm going to call it. Basically, there are many ways that little mistakes can slowly start to pop up and build up in your artwork if you are in a hurry. Similar to the problem of symmetry and not keeping things sort of balanced, there are a lot of ways that your art can gradually look worse and worse if you are trying to just go as fast as you can, finish up as soon as you can, whether it's, you know, your own motivation running out, you just want to finish it, or if you literally have deadlines and things you want to do. There are a lot of like ways that shortcuts can start to diminish the quality of your image, and I definitely needed to talk about this because I really struggled with this both in school and often on YouTube, because I'm trying to make so many drawings so quickly. There are a lot of bad habits that I've had to start to tackle in myself, and I would say that this is probably my most prominent weakness at the moment. There are a few things that you can look for in your art that are really easy tells to see if you have this problem, such as leaving in tension points, which are basically just points where the lines are barely touching. This is something that's like not really good in an image. It messes up the flow of it. Other major things are when you're like digitally painting and you're filling in things with a fill bucket tool. If you let it sort of make mistakes and then you forget to go back and fix them, this is a major indicator that like polish is an issue. Leaving like squares where it's still white, where you forgot to fill things in, as well as areas where like basically the coloring just got a little sloppy and you never went to clean it up. Areas where the inking overlaps in a way that you don't want, like on her mouth, that like one of her teeth lines have gone up past her lip and that looks really weird, and not going to the bother of looking up references for something you don't know how to draw, like the flowers on her head. They just look like crumpled nothing because I just drew them quickly the way I drew them in the sketch and then was like, that's good enough. So I circled all the little errors that have piled up in this image. It's not that the drawing is so terrible, but all of these things together end up making the whole thing look scruffier, and I recommend trying not to let that happen to your work. If you've been sitting here listening to all these weaknesses thinking that this is not the one for you, this is probably the one for you. If you think your weakness is anatomy, well, congratulations. That's almost every artist's natural like feeling of what they're the worst at. Anatomy is exceptionally difficult. Human anatomy and animal anatomy both are extremely complicated, and the great masters of painting and sculpture spent their entire lives studying it. So don't get too hard on yourself if you feel like you're not quite there yet. It's one of those things that I feel like I've only ever improved through life drawing classes, which is not so much something we can do right now. So I recommend, if you really want to get better at anatomy, is just to ask your siblings or the people you live with to pose for you every once in a while. Obviously they don't have to do it naked. Even with clothes on, it can really help you dramatically with your anatomy. If you can't do that, or you think it'd be too weird to ask them to pose for you, trying to practice anatomy with your own hand or pictures of yourself. You can also go onto websites that have life drawing classes. Well, they're not live, but they show you photos of people in a timed way to simulate a life drawing class. That can be okay as well. Primarily, I just recommend that you practice a little bit every day, and you might really be surprised by how much improvement you're going to see. But yeah, you probably won't ever feel like you've truly mastered anatomy. It's one of those things that's exceptionally difficult. You basically have to go to medical school to get it 100% figured out, because there's all these tendons and organs and fat tissues and all this. So just don't be too hard on yourself. Try to think of the body in shapes, and try to think of the whole process of learning anatomy as a journey, because it really might take a long time, but as long as you keep at it, you will keep getting better. So try not to get too upset. Also remember to pay attention to other things, because I feel like a lot of artists get so caught up in chasing better anatomy that they sometimes leave other skills completely unstudied. So give yourself a break every once in a while and focus on some other stuff, because like I said, you're in it for the long haul, so you might as well. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. A portfolio website is a must for any artist, and Squarespace makes it fun and accessible for anyone to make a professional-looking gallery of your work. I found hosting my portfolio here to have a really natural workflow, and in almost no time I had a really clean looking site, which is kind of the aesthetic I like nowadays. Squarespace automatically makes your images all fit together, so your work ends up looking neat and it, all should be on the page together. You can even make a password protected page on your site if you need to share your work privately with clients or commissioners or anything like that. It's nice that you can also really easily put content onto your site from other places like Twitter or Instagram, especially if those were the places you were already kind of hosting your stuff. It makes the whole transition from social media only to having a portfolio site a lot smoother. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch your new site, go to squarespace.com/LavenderTowne to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Good luck with your portfolios, everyone, and thank you to Squarespace for supporting my channel. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know which one applies to you, or if you feel like your art weakness wasn't listed in the video, please let me know what it is. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much to my patrons, including Munch Munch McGee, Jess Hrenick, Dude What, Matilda Minchin, Golden Castles, Azarad Clazel, Snoodles, Al Kappa, Winkus Wonkus, Aki, Blue, Zero Expectations, Wulu Luna, Lilia Lurd, Hazel Tiffia, Elizabeth Ward, The Expressive Poker Face, Morrissey Axolotl, Chris Draw, Subaki, Juliana Davis, Yume Lily, Snow White, The Becky, Liliana Hammond, Mia Lavalley, Angel File, Q Musgrove, Nicole Ludwig, Nicolette Queen, Rainwater Pearls, Ice Cream Pal, Best Kaiju, Lion, Storm Scribbles, Tom David Johansson, Ivan Rodriguez, Ilaria Louie, Nora Cornelison, Joseph Copel, Colin Lariano, Dr. Casket, Your Boy ST, JJ Jade, and of course, Lib 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 Lib.